Hey guys, I'm Chris Buck, and a very warm welcome to Fretworks. And this week we're taking a look at why I always hold the plectrum, but never use it. Well, nearly. What is that purple thing in your hand? Is, unsurprisingly, a question that I get a hell of a lot on my own videos, and recently, no surprise to see that question popping up in various formats on Paul David's Improv Challenge video, which, aside from having had a lot of views, needless to say, I hold a plectrum in my hand for the duration of my solo on that track without ever actually using it. As you can imagine, this has sparked a fair amount of intrigue as to what the point is and what I'm doing ultimately. So I thought today would be a cool opportunity to try and address that and give you a better understanding as to what exactly is happening. So in case you hadn't guessed by this point, it is indeed a plectrum, specifically a Dunlop 1.14 Tortex. Now, if you're familiar with myself and my videos, odds on you will know that I use my thumb and my fingers on my right hand a hell of a lot when I'm playing. And if I'm not using my pick, it's going to be tucked safely, ready for action at any given moment in the crease or the fold of my index finger. So why don't I use my index finger for my fingerstyle playing? The answer lies in the stupidity, or enthusiasm, shall we say, of adolescence. Back with time in my life, 14, 15, I guess, where for some reason, unbeknownst to me now with hindsight, I ditched the pick entirely and used this finger. Solely that finger, which in itself is not necessarily a problem, but considering I was listening to a lot of punk rock, bands like Sum 41, Offspring, Newfound Glory, Blink-182, Alkaline Trio, starts to give you an idea of why it wasn't such a good idea. Subsequently, this finger, or this nail specifically, is absolutely ruined. Snaps at the first sign of trouble like a wet Kit Kat, and won't grow to any meaningful length. And the sensation of this on string kind of goes through me. It's kind of like nails down a chalkboard at this point. Playing as percussively or as aggressively as I do with my right hand, clearly this finger isn't really going to be up to scratch. So fast forward a few years when I revisited the idea of playing fingerstyle, instead of it just sitting there like an inflatable dartboard, decided to put it to good use and try the idea of holding a pick with it. And at this point, several years on, it's so much a kind of innate part of my playing that honestly, even if I don't necessarily use the plectrum, as with Paul David's video, it still makes sense for me to have it there. I guess it's kind of like aircon in a car. You don't always use it, but it's great to have for when it's warm. Another question I get very frequently is why I don't ditch the pick. And I guess ultimately the answer is at this point that, aside for the novelty value of maybe being able to hashtag no pick on Instagram, it kind of doesn't really make sense. It's so much a part of my playing that even if I don't necessarily use the plectrum all that much, it makes sense to have it there. Now the next clip you're going to see is the intro clip again, but with a dedicated close-up on my right hand to show you what is happening. And then we're going to delve into a bit of further exploration to try and give you a total understanding of not only the technique, but some of the rationale behind why, I guess ultimately, I started playing with my fingers. Let's delve right in. So what's going on? Why are we here? Now hopefully that last little close-up clip of the introduction focusing on my right hand will have given you a better understanding as to what is going on, but ultimately it is a very frequent or consistent comment I get, is that it's all happening so quickly it's hard to try and make out the finer points of it. So hopefully this angle here, looking down the guitar as opposed to focusing on that end, will hopefully fill in some of the blanks. Now there's two things I want to talk about primarily. First of which, this thing here, if the camera wants to focus on it, plectrum. Even if it's out of focus, you can probably tell what it is. It is a slightly knackered, slightly rounded plectrum at this point. What is happening with it and where's it going? In short, it's been tucked into the crease, the crevice, the nook, the cranny, whatever you want to call it, the fleshy bit of my index finger. Reason being, back and forth. If I need it, it's there. If I don't, it's not there. Back and forth, back and forth. We can try and get in focus. In the words of Tommy Cooper, just like that. That's pretty much the mechanics of it. I've explained why I use my index finger for that. It's knackered, otherwise that really wouldn't be good for much. So it's not so much losing a digit for this type of thing, so much as it's gaining something that I wouldn't have otherwise. Now, it's worth mentioning at this point that when I switch back and forth between the plectrum, or my fingers, honestly, it's an entirely kind of subconscious thought process at this point. This is something I've been doing for so long that I really don't think about it at all, which makes these type of videos a little bit hard because you're trying to reverse engineer something which, quite frankly, I don't really fully understand myself because it's so innate in my playing that, you know, any conscious thought process has long gone, or is long so far embedded in my brain that I don't really actively think about it anymore. In that respect, it is worth mentioning that if you've never done this before, it is a little bit strange. It can be slightly alien to start off with and will inevitably have you frustrated and dropping plectrums left, right and centre, disappearing in the abyss that is occupied by plectrums and pen lids, no doubt. So have many on hand because it will get slightly frustrating, and as with anything, it takes practice, dedication, time, energy, perseverance, all the stuff ultimately which we just buy pedals to try and avoid. I'll try and give you just a quick demonstration as to what is happening with the back and forth. Just play a little bit of stuff. Which brings me to my second point. Why would you do any of that? Why would you go to the faff, the hassle, all the fun of incorporating that into your playing? Now, hopefully that last little clip will have given you at least part of the answer. In short, tone, texture and dynamic variation. You have so much of all of those with your fingers than you do with a plectrum. Now that's not to denigrate a plectrum at all. Clearly I use one all of the time, but you get so much more colours to paint with, I guess, ultimately. It's probably a good way of thinking about it, with your fingers than you do with the plectrum. Of course, there are ways of kind of softening the plectrum effect, or whatever you want to call it. You can play with the blunt end, you can play with the sides, you can do stuff to try and lessen its plectrum sound, but ultimately it's always going to sound like a piece of plastic because, funnily enough, it is a piece of plastic. Your fingers, on the other hand, if you never noticed, are not made of plastic. They are made of flesh, bone, blood, and all that kind of fun stuff, which I should have paid more attention to in biology. Flesh is inherently going to sound darker, it's going to sound softer, it's going to sound more rounded than a bit of plastic. So you get all of these kind of lovely, dark, slightly woolly kind of... There we go, there's your answer. All of that kind of dark, sort of cool sounding stuff, just you wouldn't get with the plectrum. If we take a lick, doesn't really matter what it is. If we say... trying to emulate that with your fingers, cool thing is you can kind of get somewhat close just by using your nails and really digging in. So the funny thing is, you can kind of do a passable impression of a plectrum just by using your nails. But ultimately, if you try and do that the other way around, and try and emulate that softness, using a pick, it's a sound, but it's not the sound. It doesn't get vaguely close to it because, as I said, it is a bit of plastic and it's going to have that immediacy and that attack that you don't get with your fingers. Now, as I said, tucking the plectrum up in there does give me access, or does give me the use, I guess, ultimately of my thumb, my second and my third finger, which you can kind of get fairly percussive with. The intro track to this video probably wasn't the best example, but I'll close on an old clip which will show you kind of how aggressive I get with it. Ultimately, you can really dig in and get some cool tones that you don't necessarily get with the plectrum. Plectrum is more precise and, you know, as I said, I don't think it's as dynamic, truth be told. So if you really want to kind of there's almost an extra kind of added bass response or something going on when you try and emulate a plectrum with your nail. It's a weird kind of little quirk, which, again, it's not to denigrate the pick. It's not to denigrate one or the other, to be honest, just to show you that there are different tonal variations available. Now, this is not to say that I'm advocating ditching the pick or any such nonsense. There is ultimately stuff that I play with the plectrum, which I just flat out can't play with the fingers. If you take a lick or a riff like Anastasia by Slash, can't do that speed anywhere near it. It's just really awkward with your fingers. And likewise, all of that kind of slashy sort of run-up stuff I do sometimes. All that kind of stuff, you can do an approximation of it. But it's not really in the same ballpark. So this is not me advocating to do one or the other, to be honest, but if you've never played with your fingers before, I would definitely recommend at least giving it a go. As I said, it gives you more colours to paint with and just ultimately adds an extra kind of dimension into your playing. It's very often said that your left hand is what you know and your right hand is who you are. And I think there's a modicum of truth in that, as pretentious or as kind of cliched as it is. It just gives you more chance to express yourself eruditely and gives you a better chance of really saying what it is that you want to say. But in danger of disappearing up my own backside, I think back to the main camera. And there you have it. As ever, thank you very much for watching, and I really hope this video was of some use to you. As I said, playing fingerstyle isn't the easiest thing you'll ever do, but if you do decide to persevere with it, it's undoubtedly one of the most rewarding things you can do on a guitar. And ultimately, even if you don't necessarily use it all that frequently, it's great to have in your arsenal. As ever, I'm Chris Buck, you're watching Friday Fretworks. Please subscribe, hit the bell icon if you haven't already, and I shall see you next week for another episode. Cheers guys, take care, and I'll see you soon.